More than 60 years ago, a Nepali parliamentarian delegation stepped into Shanghai. Chairman Mao greeted them and said something that stayed with me. We feel equal when we meet you. The world is changing, and it is impossible for a few big countries to control others. For me, it was not just a quote. It made me curious about how representation of global South countries in the world, and this guided my 10 years across China. Namaste and ni hao. My name is Aneka Rebecca Rajbhandari, and I'm from Nepal. I'm currently doing a master's in China Studies, focusing on international relations in the Yenching Academy of Peking University. But I arrived 10 years ago in Beijing in 2015 at the age of 17, with Mandarin that barely survived conversations and optimism that survived everything else. My first 2 years were humbling. I made easy mistakes like saying 我爱妈 instead of 我爱妈, turning I love horses to I love scolding people. My whole class laughed, and I laughed too, because every mistake felt like one step forward. My teacher taught me two things that carried me: 坚持, persistence, and Lao Tzu's reminder that 千里之行，始于足下, a 1,000 miles journey begins beneath your feet. Those steps eventually took me to Peking University's Chinese-taught undergraduate program, majoring in political science. No Nepali seniors, no Nepali classmates. Later, I learned that I was the first Nepali to complete a fully Chinese-taught bachelor's degree at the Peking University's Yanyuan campus. Being a pioneer feels lonely until you realize you are crossing a bridge that nobody else has built before you. As I studied, I became curious about not only how China sees the world, but also how China sees Nepal, and how little of our centuries-long exchanges were remembered. Nepal and China celebrated 70 years of diplomatic relations in 2025, but our shared history is far older. Walking around Beijing, I kept finding Nepal everywhere. The White Dagoba in Xicheng district of Beijing, built by Nepali artist Arniko over 750 years ago. The Palace Museum painting of Nepal's tributary elephants for Qing Emperor Tianlong. Even spinach, now common in China, first entered as a gift by the Lichavi king Narendra Dev of Nepal to the Tang Dynasty Emperor Taizong. This inspired me and my partner in work and life, who I met at Peking University, to start the Aneka Project, dedicated to researching and sharing Nepal-China relations, because we believe mutual understanding begins with knowledge, and knowledge begins with curiosity. Yet Nepal often disappears from global conversations, and many global South countries face the same invisibility. The importance of representation is felt by those who have been deprived of it. That is why I feel responsible to speak about it today. Today, I stand here as the only Nepali student in my degree program, and I am grateful to study China Studies in China, because you cannot understand a country from afar. Real understanding grows from being inside its daily rhythms, its conversations, its classrooms, and its memories, because Baiwen Buru Itian. This is why representation gives my work meaning. Even if my research seems niche, it still has a place and a voice. A few weeks ago, I stood in front of the mural at China's Central Gifts and Artifacts Center. It is called 智慧月山海. It is made out of 23 million stones from 5 continents. From a distance, they will become one big landscape. Its message says, when our aspirations align, even mountains and seas cannot keep us apart. To me, this is global governance. When we turn on the news today, we see divisions and unilateral actions which have consequences. But for countries like Nepal, multilateralism is not a luxury. It is a form of protection. This brings me to the heart of the topic, Global Governance Initiative. GGI feels like meaningful because it reminds us that global governance must reflect today's realities and not yesterday's hierarchies. To me, GGI is an invitation, especially for young scholars from the Global South, bring our lived experiences to the global table. Living in China taught me that governance does not only live in books, it lives in everyday life. From watching strangers queue during rush hour, by seeing lost item found exactly where left, and in quiet hours reading through Nepal-China's historical archives, I also learned about how Nepal was seen by others. Sometimes surprising, sometimes humbling. If we want multilateralism to survive, we must build understanding through presence. This is why my work with the Aneka Project matters. Representation gives it meaning. Cooperation gives it a future. A few days ago, I visited Arniko's statue at the Miaoying Temple. He stood facing me in front of the white dagoba he built more than 700 years ago. For a long time, I thought I was the first. Standing there, I realized I was not, in fact, the first. I was simply continuing a long Nepali story in China. Because representation is not about being seen, but it is about belonging to a legacy and carrying it forward. This brings me back to Chairman Mao's words. This will change. Change is inevitable when we choose curiosity over fear, knowledge over ignorance, and representation over silence. So if GGI calls for a more inclusive world, then our task is simple. Be curious, be present, build the bridge you want others to cross. Because global governance does not begin in institutions. In fact, it begins in people. It begins in the stories we tell, and today it should begin with us.